Hello and welcome to the best NFL Survivor Pool video you will ever watch. And I know that because I've lived it and profited from the tips you'll get in this video and also the tools we're going to show you with Pool Genius to go along with that. My name is Steven Andress. I'm joined by Jason Lisk, data analysis and content over at Pool Genius. In this episode, this is an NFL Survivor video for strategy. We'll walk you through what Pool Genius has in terms of the best tools for NFL Survivor pools, and we'll also give you our 5 favorite rules of thumb to follow as the season goes along and hopefully get you to the end and maybe win that pool to be the sole survivor. First of all, Jason, hello. How are you? I know that this is one of your favorite topics to talk about, one of your favorite pools to play in each and every year.
Yeah, survivor pools are great. They, so simple looking, yet so strategic. So many possibilities, and just so fun to be a part of. If you're a sadist, right? If you like having to wait a week for big events to happen, and then either seeing your pick implode in the first quarter, maybe seeing it come back, or maybe seeing it fall apart at the end. Because what we know in the NFL is over half the games will involve some sort of fourth quarter drama, even if you're on a big favorite.
For sure. And, when we're talking about the rules to follow here and strategies and tips when it comes to NFL Survivor, let's kick it off with what is, to me, the number one rule that I follow, the one that helped me win a Survivor pool last year with these tips and strategies, with using the Pool Genius tools for the 2024 season. And to me, it's just number one, try not to pick the chalk. In other words, do not pick the most popular team in NFL Survivor pools if you can avoid it, at least for the first half of the season. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, if you're picking the most popular team each and every week, you're reducing your chances of being the sole survivor. Number two, it increases your chances of splitting the pot if that's the case. So, Jason, as we go along here, I want to share what this looks like, not only from the rules that we like to follow, but how to apply them using Pool Genius as well. So go ahead and bring this up for us, and we'll go through. If we log into Pool Genius here and we go to the menu and click on NFL Survivor, you can see that there's a customization option here. But also, if you go to Data Grid each and every week, and as we record this, we're getting ready for week 1 of the 2025 season. So that's where this data is coming from. But immediately, there is a column for you to check out based on popularity. So for me, right off the bat, I know I probably am going to not pick the Denver Broncos, even though they may be the biggest favorite in NFL week 1. If you think back to the 2024 season, everybody picked the Bengals. They were one of the biggest favorites. And, as much as you may have confidence that the biggest favorite's going to win every week, this is the National Football League. I mean, it's a total cliche, but any given Sunday, right? So 29% popularity projected right now for Denver going into week 1 of the 2025 NFL season. I'm just not interested in that. So, Jason, as we first talk about this rule, the first question I have for you is, where does Pool Genius derive this popularity column from? Where do you guys get the percentages?
These percentages are taken in from various sites. We do get some of the large public sites that you definitely, that have just a wide range of people playing, like ESPN, Yahoo. And then we get some smaller sites, but have more, maybe a dedicated audience that's a little sharper than what you're going to see. So we blend that. We make some calls, right? At least for week 1, because some of this is also where we think it's trending. Like Arizona was slightly below this number in the early data, but I think by next week. So that's kind of that's taking in both public data and kind of predicting where we think it's going to go when we start seeing people register in, 3-4 days before, because we're going to get a lot of people coming in next week. So that data is mostly what we're getting, and that number will change throughout the week. And it may involve some adjustments from us early in the process as we try to anticipate how it's going to move.
And again, we're recording this about a week before the TNF kickoff between the Eagles and the Cowboys. But obviously, this type of video should help you no matter what season you are watching this video from. Jason, do you agree with this rule? I know that some people like to make exceptions to this rule at certain times of the season. Where do you stand with the general rule of thumb of not picking the chalk each week in Survivor?
I would say we are if you look at our recommendations to people in a given week, we tend to be lighter on the most popular pick because it does have a downward impact on your expected value for the reasons you laid out, right? You're going to go forward with more of the pool if it wins. And so your kind of upside is somewhat capped. That said, I think there are times to be on the chalk pick. Um, and I think maybe in about a third of situations, maybe a quarter, depending on the case. Is it a really high win odds team, right? So maybe they're like, I think like last year, let's Baltimore at the end of the season when they caught the Giants,
Yeah.
right? So even if 35% of the polls on Baltimore, they were a 17 point favorite. If you had them at 90% win odds, you probably need to play that. That number would have to be 60% before you talk me out of that. So I think it matters how good the matchup is. It matters what other people are resorting to, right? Because you may have a week where there's two popular picks, and maybe you want to take one side and fade the other by taking the best play against that one directly. So all those things come up, but as a general rule, popularity will drive the value down, and so you do want to consider what impact popularity has on your edge.
Love it. All right, let's back out here to the two shot again, and we'll move on to the second tip for NFL Survivor strategy. And to me, Jason, it's really just about being flexible when it comes to making your picks each and every week. And what I mean by that is the NFL is one of the most efficient markets in the sports betting world, but occasionally there are going to be differences in the pool genius win percentage, which you can highlight here in the same area. Again, you go to the data grid under the pool genius options for this NFL Survivor pool genius tool. You go under data grid, we're under the week view, and you can see the PG odds here, the pool genius odds on the win probability of each of these teams, and right next to it, the market odds. So obviously, we want to respect the NFL market. Extremely efficient market globally, but there are going to be some differences from time to time. I think about later in the season when impactful injuries start to take shape when it comes to the NFL. Might have questionable players that we're keeping an eye on before we get to kickoff of those games. That those types of, especially if it's a quarterback, those can greatly shift win probability for a
Mm-hmm.
potential team. So that's just something I want to keep in mind. But Jason, back over to you. I mean, where do you guys derive your pool genius odds? And are they typically in line with this efficient market, or how would you describe this process for when you guys assign a win probability?
Yeah, so the market odds obviously we're taking in from a variety of sports books. We're getting those. Those aren't just one book. That's kind of a median or us balancing like across several. So you may see a line at say a large public U.S. book and be like, oh, my number's slightly different. But we're getting it from market making books. We're getting it from all sorts. As for the models, there are several models, a decision tree model that goes through a bunch of stat factors, power ratings models, and then there's our overall model, which blends a bunch of things, and that's what we see under PG odds. Now, here's what I would say: those are tethered to the market, meaning we're not going to be wildly off. We may be 5-6% at most, and usually in most cases we're going to be within one or two. Those are based on things like we talked about. Decision tree might look at a matchup, right? Certain factors in that matchup. How a team had done recently or at the end of the previous year, how their stat profile was compared to a team with the other team's stat profile, division game, non-division game, road game, all that stuff goes into those. So you may be seeing the impact of some of those things. I would say when it comes to upsets, we have been profitable on those over the last 5 years. Obviously, year-to-year fluctuations, but there is some signal. So we do want to pay some attention, but we also don't want to go overboard with our pool genius odds because, quite frankly, we think we have an edge with the other things, right? Planning,
Right.
taking into account popularity. So we also don't want to take super strong stands on a team versus the market. So we're taking into account all that.
Yeah, I think being flexible can mean a couple things, right? Obviously, monitoring injuries. You're
Mhm.
talking about potential leverage situations where you think a team might be able to pull an upset. To me, that's a situation in an NFL survivor pool where you're getting closer to the end game at the end of the year and you may have multiple entries left. And now you have a potential very popular team that week where you can take the chance of using the other team in that matchup to get huge leverage. And if you're wrong, it's okay. You still have an entry left. So that's part of the strategy here too with being flexible, is that you want to have maybe multiple entries in your pools. Listen, I'm not going to lie to you. When I won this pool last year using the Pool Genius tools, that was one of 5 survivor entries I had across. The more bullets you have, the more chance you have to win these survivor pools. So that's part of being flexible. So I think it's always going into each and every week, Jason, fresh,
Mhm.
taking in the new information we have from both the games that have been played the previous week, before that for the rest of the season, and also whatever the latest injury news is. Maybe you have to pick 18 teams no matter what. And some of the pools you have to pick more. If you're playing in the big circle pool,
Yeah.
you're going to have to pick 20. You're playing in some of these splash pools. The double pick weeks come pretty quickly in the second half of the season. So understand how many of the 32 NFL teams you're going to have to pick, and understand that your opinion might have to change on a team you thought was a team you had to save for the rest of the year because they might have been really good. Think back 2 years ago, think back 2023 season between the two Eagles Super Bowls, and everybody thought they were going to be awesome. And then they had 2 brand new coordinators and they went through a huge rough patch. I mean, if you're in a survivor pool at that point, you're kicking yourself for saving the Eagles for late in the season, because now you're just nervous as all hell to even pick them. So keep that in mind. Your opinion could change, and understand the schedules that are laid out before these teams. And that goes to, our number 3 tip here, Jason, is understanding future value.
Yep.
What we think of these teams now is important because it dictates whether we want to use them now or use them in the future. And again, the NFL being one of the most efficient markets in the world when it comes to sports wagering is going to be a pretty decent barometer of who to use down the line. And also, if you have certain weeks like the circa pools where you have to pick more than one, you have to pick on the Thanksgiving and Black Friday slate, or you're picking on Christmas Day. Well, that's only 6 possible teams you can pick on that slate anyway. So future value takes on a totally different definition in that case as well. Also, the pools where you have to pick multiple teams later in the season. Again, future value takes on a different. But just from the basic standpoint here, Jason, of having to pick 18 teams no matter what to win a survivor pool at bare minimum, when you think of future value, what are you thinking about to start the season here? Is it as simple as knowing which teams are the highest power rated in the NFL going into that season, or is it a little bit more than that?
It is a little more than that. That's obviously a big part, right? You want to plan out your season. You aren't setting in stone, right? We think Buffalo, we think Baltimore, we think the Chiefs, we think the Eagles are going to be among the top contenders. That's almost certainly going to be the case unless injuries rack those teams, I believe. So we're pretty safe in projecting they're going to be useful at a bunch of different spots. There will be surprises that pop up. We will adapt to those. So what we show in week 1 will be different than what we're showing you in week 5, because our power ratings will go up on teams if they play well. They'll go down
Sure.
on teams that look bad, right? And so we're going to adapt. So what we would say is look to the future, but don't be rigid about it, right? I'm going to save Buffalo unless it's a great spot, because I know there's multiple spots to use them. Maybe it's this week, maybe it's this week, maybe it's this week, but I'm not making that decision yet. I just know they're valuable and they have spots. Um, I would say people that take the viewpoint of the NFL is unpredictable are wrong, in the sense that, yes, it's a week to week, things can happen, crazy stuff can happen, but our general outlook on teams actually is pretty good. Like for
Yeah,
most part,
I agree.
there might be 10-20% of teams that significantly are different than what we expected by like 2 or 3 wins at the end of the year,
Yeah.
right?
The Panthers
Most
aren't winning
teams
the
are going to be
conference, right?
right. I mean, and if it's a surprise because they won close games, things like that, but we're not power rating them. And so, um, last year I was pointing to weeks like in week 2, 3, I was pointing to, hey, you might want to have Philly for week 14 against Carolina. You might. They turned out to be a 2-touchdown favorite, biggest of the week, high value. Pointing out those teams usually worked out. There will be cases that pop up. The Giants collapsed last year. Their quarterback situation, I think they played 4 different quarterbacks, and they were a disaster by the end of the year. That people were picking against. It cost people with the Colts, but their spreads, The Giants became a team to pick against that we didn't expect. The Browns became a team to pick against we didn't expect at the start of the year. They were a disaster. So that happens. Um, but you want to be adaptable. So that's the main thing. The other thing is trying to project not only win odds, but pick popularity in the future. Because it's not a perfect science, but you can identify like kind of leverage points on the calendar in the schedule. Oh, the two biggest favorites are Buffalo and Baltimore, and people will have used them in 5 or 6 different weeks before then. People are going to be concentrated on this other team, who's the only other team we project right now over a touchdown. That team's going to be super popular. That might be a high leverage spot for those teams or somebody else. And so teams that can be opposite them in those weeks will have higher future value because they'll have higher potential EV. So we're trying to predict not only popularity or not only win odds, but how will people behave? How will people react to how that season might pan out? It's not perfect, but having some plan is better than no plan.
Well, let's drive these points home again using the Pool Genius tools to show them because, having a plan is very important. And there is a tab here under the NFL Survivor tools called Season Planner. And I think this is, really, really valuable because it gives you a huge grid to look at of what right now the projected win percentage is for each of these teams each and every week of the season and who they're playing. So I want to use an example, using this grid for potential future value. And, for me, just a rule of thumb, we already talked about it. I don't want to take the most popular team right now going into the 2025 season, week one. It looks like the Denver Broncos are going to be that. So I don't want to take the Denver Broncos here in week number one. Part of the reason for that is if I look at this season planner and look at the rest of the year here, we are looking at a potential situation where Denver is a pretty decent favorite in a lot of games. Week 2 against Indy, week 6 and 7 against the New York teams, week 8 against Dallas, who now no longer has Micah Parsons. Doing my schedule research here, like I'm looking at strength of schedule based on win totals in the NFL market, not last year's win percentages that you see on, the big sports networks. That is completely useless to this exercise and not predictive of what's going to happen the following year. Use the efficient market. Look at, you can go to a handful of sports books and see every spread for every game going into an NFL season to see at least going into the year how big of a favorite they're going to be in how many games. And what I looked at with Denver was almost half their games are going to be a 3-point favorite or larger
Yep.
in 8 or 9 games or so. So Denver's a team that I not only want to pick because they're popular in week one, but because there's going to be a handful of spots where I can use them the rest of the season. The Philadelphia Eagles, another case here where one of the best spots to pick them might be week one, but there's a couple spots against the Giants later. But the Eagles have a far tougher schedule than the Denver Broncos do. Really tough. They're highly power rated, so they're going to be favorites in a lot of those games, but they're not going to be big favorites. So I think there's two things here to also remember, Jason. Number one is, are they one of the higher power rated teams going into the year? But also, is their schedule easy or hard? I think the Eagles are a highly power rated team that has a hard schedule. I think the Bills are a highly power rated team that has an easier schedule. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of future value. But everything we've talked about, the inverse is also true, right? The worst teams that we may want to play against in NFL survivor pools, typically when it comes to the NFL, will get even more worse in the second half of the year. As guys get injured or banged up, they might just IR them and play younger guys to see if they're going to be better. And that's how every year in the NFL, Jason, we get these teams like the Cleveland Browns and the New Orleans Saints potentially, or maybe even the Carolina Panthers if things don't go their way. Potentially teams that are a shell of what they were in week one. And now you're talking about double-digit underdogs in the second half of the year. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Maybe these highly power rated teams, do they get to face one of these lower teams in the second half of the year where they're going to be an even bigger favorite? Because as we go into the 2025 season, Jason,
Yep.
there's 2 teams that are more than a touchdown favorite. That certainly will not be the case in the last month or two of the season.
Yeah, those things will sort themselves out. Some of these win odds will move 5% up either direction, and that'll impact how we shift, right? Like you talked about, the Giants will fell apart at the end of last year. They became a team to play against. I want you to sort actually week 10. Sort week 10, and we'll kind of demonstrate what you're talking about with Denver. So that 69% doesn't look like, if you look at 77%, that's higher than 69. So you're like, oh, maybe I should use them week 1. Okay, so that 69%, though, every week's different, and the matchups are different, and the quality of like how even teams are with how the NFL makes the schedule, it's kind of random, but not every week is equal. Week 10 has a lot of good teams on buys. It also, as you can see there, we have Buffalo. They're the only team at 71%. Okay, they're going to be useful in a lot of weeks.
Yep.
We have Chicago.
Look at all this green for Buffalo.
Yeah. We have Chicago. Chicago could get steamed up that week, especially if a lot of people in pools have used Denver. Denver could be a high leverage play at 69%. Some weeks you may not want a 69% pick, but that week, that Denver pick, that's an example when I talked about finding those leverage spots, not only on win odds, but how things project. I would just guess Chicago will be more popular than Denver based on availability that week. And so and a lot of people will, honestly, if the Saints are as bad as people think, we could have people picking the Panthers if they're just okay.
Yeah.
If they're just okay by that point. And so you could have a situation where Denver's a high EV play at something like 10% owned because it's a risky week in general.
And to make another point about your Chicago example, playing the Giants that week, think about teams who might have a quarterback change second half of the year too. Now it's Jackson Dart second half of the year. We'll have some time if he comes in after a really tough stretch before the Giants bye week. We'll have some time, a couple of weeks, to see if he's any good or if he's a massive project. So, maybe these rookie quarterbacks who are in over their heads that are not the blue chip prospects in the draft that we saw in the 2024 NFL draft, where you had 7 quarterbacks taken early. So something to think about there as well. Potential quarterback changes for teams going to guys that might not be ready. Cleveland Browns, another example of that. They go away from Flacco and have a couple of day 3 pick quarterbacks going into the fold here for the second half of the season. All right, Jason. I also want to look at here to kind of show another option with Pool Genius. Another tool to look at this is the optimal path tool, another way to look at future value. And this is just one of my favorites here when it comes to NFL Survivor. I use this every week in last year to win this thing. And what you'll see are just 2 ways to look at things here. If you press the big blue button here, and every week you can plug in your picks for the teams you've already used. Obviously, we haven't used any yet, so these aren't filled in. But this will update with the teams you've already used, so they won't show them again later in the season. And there's 2 ways to look at this. Number one, you can plan out based on highest win probability all the way through, so you're not having to do this manually, maybe making mistakes. Number one is max expected value. The max expected value option under this optimal path tool will give you the biggest chance to be the sole survivor in your pool and scoop the entire pot. If you only care about getting to the end, regardless of how many people are with you at the end, then this max survival tool under the optimal path is another option here. So I love these, Jason. Just anything you want to add on these tools that people can use
Yeah.
every week?
So if you've used our tools before, there are some changes for 2025. And if you're new, exciting changes that you will experience as
Okay.
well that you weren't even aware weren't there before. So previously with our optimal path tool, it wasn't really tied. How you can set up to 30 entries, right? And you can set your entries up and get pick recommendations. The optimal path tool was kind of independent of that, and it just showed you as a tool, but it wasn't tied to the actual entries you set up with their rules. Now we have it set up where for 2025, you can import each entry. We obviously don't have past picks now, but once you get into the season, it'll load those in automatically. In the past, you kind of had to go in and set your past picks. So this will save people a lot of time to be able to
That's
run
right
an
here,
out.
right? I only
Yeah.
have one in there right now, my Circa Survivor entry.
Once you load up all those 30 entries, you'll be able to go to the pull down, pull each one up, and run the path for each entry.
That's great.
Not only that, our optimal path tool used to provide you, as did the season planner, 1 pick per week. Now You can import your pool rules or set it to multiple pick weeks. Designate which weeks you want to see multiple picks included in the path. And so now, even more so, because in the past, I play in a ton of multi pick pools. This will help me. I was using our data, but now I can see it directly because I often wondered, well, would Optimal Path have agreed with me on saving this team for this week? And now we can see that when you're required to make 2 picks, what happens
Love
to both
that.
your odds to win and your path.
That's fantastic because as I mentioned, Circle, you get the double pick week in week 13 for Thanksgiving and week 17 for Christmas. So that's fantastic. There's a bunch of pools where second half you're picking double all these weeks. So that's I didn't even know about that coming into this, Jason. That's a
Yeah, that
really
was
good addition.
just that's something we added here in the last couple weeks to Optimal Path, and check back for the circuit tools. I don't want to say anything right now until they're
Okay.
officially launched next week, but we will have additional circuit tools also related to Optimal Path, I believe, that you will want to check out.
Again, if you guys aren't figuring it out yet, like I would not have had a prayer of winning that survivor pool last year if I wasn't using these tools. I went a half a decade trying to win survivor pools, just doing it on my own and failed miserably every single time. And I finally did it last year, Jason, and won the damn thing. So
Well,
I am living proof that this thing works.
yeah, and you know what? Survivor is a long odds game, right?
It is. It
I
is.
played 50. I played way more than 30 entries last year. I hit one big one, but one big one pays for more than all my entry fees and
Yeah.
everything. So I'm just hoping to find that path through and hit a result, and I'm spreading it out, playing a portfolio. Go down a little bit here too. I also want to point one
Sure.
other thing out when you use our optimal path tool, because go to click on show alternates under each of those. So here's the thing: we'll show you the number one, but we'll also show you variations on that number one that may switch a few teams here and there on where they might show up. So you might see some slightly different teams showing up in different weeks depending on
Yeah. Let's look
which
at week
alternate
7 here.
mentioned. Yeah, like week 10 has the Bears and then also Denver
Yep.
as two options in that week.
So yeah, you're
Um,
flipping Denver and Chicago here, week 7
yeah.
and week 10 potentially. One example there.
And we may see others flip so each week you can come back and check it because it's going to change slightly. We're going to
Yep.
take in more information. A team's power rating will go up a little bit, and maybe they become the optimal pick on that week instead of a different one. And so you can see all that. Like in week 17, we have Washington, the Cincy in one. We have Washington, Tennessee in the survival one, and I bet the alternates are also changing some of those things. So, just another
Love it.
way to look at it. I use the optimal path a lot of times to check, like, once my entries have some picks out of the way and I have different portfolios and I have an entry that's used a certain team and another one hasn't, where are the decision points coming? Which teams seem to be the key picks and which ones are more debatable when we look at the optimal path? That's kind of how I use it too, is like, okay, I think this team, I could switch to this team because it's not that much different versus this team's showing up in every single simulation. Probably pretty important to have in that range.
Yeah, great point. All right, bring me back out to the two shot here, and
Okay.
we'll move on to our next big tip for NFL survivor pools each and every year. And this may sound silly, but know your pool rules.
Yes.
I cannot emphasize that enough. There are too many people who don't understand their pool rules, who play in a major pool and then are surprised when week 11 comes around and they have to pick two teams. There are people who get surprised when their pick deadline is on a Saturday, when they're going in and planning on making their pick on a Sunday. Some people don't realize that the deadline is to make their picks by the 1 p.m. Eastern time kickoffs on Sunday. They don't realize that, thinking they have until 4 o'clock to pick a team in the late window. So just make sure before the season even starts that you look at your rules and you understand all the nuances when it comes to pick deadlines and also whether you have to make multiple picks any weeks throughout the season. So, and there's other pools on top of that too, right? Niche pools, Jason. Like I know you've played in every one of these pools. There's some where you get multiple chances, some where you can rebuy up to a certain point. So, what stands out to you when it comes to those different nuances?
Yeah, you definitely read your rules, and as part when if you are a subscriber and you set up a pool with us, we're going to ask you those questions. So you should be having to read them so you can
Yeah,
input
let's do
and
it
give
right
us
now.
the right
Keep
information.
talking, and as you're saying it, bring me up here, and let's
Yeah.
do it right now. Let's walk them through. You go to my pool picks here up here. I've already
Yeah.
set one up, but let's add a new pool, and we can just use this as an example. But go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. So we're going to walk you through, and you're going to have to look at your pool hosting site, the pool setup, and find the rules just to make sure, like confirm, do I have strikes, right? All this stuff. We have it set where you could automatically set them all to no with that button up top. But if you want to go through, you can do that if you know you have a specialty like, oh, I have multiple pick weeks. Yes. Okay. I'm gonna have to make a pick, at least more than one pick in at least 1 week. You want to check that one. You can see all the varieties we have here. I'll talk through some of them. Strike pools are a big one. That means if you're new to Survivor, that means you can take a loss and stay alive with that entry. You can have one where it's one strike and then you're out with the second loss. You can have two strikes and you're out. So, and then you're out on the third. So all those kind of pools exist, and I've seen all types. Those have different strategy. If I can take a strike, it means people are more likely to last longer because they don't get eliminated in week one. They get multiple chances at it. And B, I want to think about taking maybe some riskier teams, especially if I have to make a lot of picks in a strike pool to get deeper into the season. I'm willing to risk a loss on a team that's underpicked and has no future value, right? So I may be willing to play more like the 3.5 point home team that otherwise you wouldn't consider in any other week, but they have a decent matchup. Team like Jacksonville or a team like that is at home and a favorite. So those things come up in strike pools. Buybacks are similar. So buybacks mean you can buy back into the pool, but you don't have to. So you do have to pay more money. Strike pools is automatic. Buybacks, you have to invest more money in the pot. You got to think about that, but we would say check it and let us know. And then if you buy back, there's a way you click in when that happens. So in our product, we would if you take a loss with a pick, we'll say, did you buy back in? You can click yes, the entry survived. But those are similar to strike pools. Like I'm willing to take a little more risk if you're willing to buy back in. The others, there's bye week pools. Bye weeks are valuable. I don't want to. I get a free pass into the next week. It's strategic on when you want to use that, right? You don't want to just waste it in week one, I don't think, in most pools. You want to wait for that week when your decisions are tougher or the pool's like super concentrated on what you think is a risky pick and you just want to lay low and see if the pool gets wiped out.
There
So
seems to
there are some
always be like
strategies.
just 1 week, Jason, where there isn't more than a 5.5 point favorite, right? There's always one of
Yeah,
those weeks teams are on bye. It just tends to happen, and that's really the optimal time to maybe use one of those.
that's one of them. The other is, like I said, when you personally just have the way your season is played out is you just don't have a pick that week, but others do. Maybe
Yeah.
you just want to lay low. And then the other one, like I said, is 50% of the pool is going to be on this team. I don't want to be on them, but I don't like my other options to fade them. So I'm just going to like sit it out.
Yeah, I love that.
And so multi pick weeks, we've kind of talked about playoff pools, super huge variable. There are pools that will extend in the playoffs and you don't reset the team. So you use the Chiefs, you use the Ravens, you're done with those teams, even if they're the playoff matchups. So you have to plan in those for even more picks. And you don't know the playoff matchups yet. So you have to almost have a few playoff teams in your back pocket if you think it's going to go the distance into the playoffs. So we help with those. Season win tiebreakers. The worst feeling in the world is to get to the end, because in most pools you would split the pot, right? But there are some pools that have tiebreakers. If multiple people make it to the end or tie, the team that wins the tiebreaker wins the pot. Well, commonly we see as season wins, the person that picked the teams that had the fewest total wins over the course of the year wins the tiebreaker. So you want to mix in some really risky, say, 5 and 12 type teams that happen to catch a win, and you can win those tiebreakers. So knowing that, we give you slightly different advice as the pool is playing out. And then, there's other rules there that we also highlight.
Yeah, ones you've come across from user feedback, some niche pools. Basically, you've done everything you can to cover no matter what type of survivor pool you're in. You pretty much got it covered here, which is fantastic. So once you do all that, let's see here. Let me go back. So they're just double checking, make sure I have the pools typed in, all the rules properly. Let's just do a basic one here where none of this stuff is allowed and you just pick 18 teams each week. So we move on. It'll ask you to type in how many entries you have in your pool. And Jason, I assume the reason for that is to help your modeling here decide how much risk to take on each and every week for, potential max EV and whatnot.
Yeah, there's multiple reasons we take that in, right? One of them is to give you the best advice. Like, how big is your pool? Because we will model how kind of an expected range. Like, we're gonna value a team with a great matchup in week 15 differently if you only have 10 people left in your pool in week 3 than if you have 800. Like, it's not very important for the one with very few people left, right? You're not getting to week 15 in 99% of scenarios. So we're taking that into account. So we have individual pool future value numbers based on expected contest length. So that's one reason. And we will ask you that each week as you come back to get your next set of picks. How many people are left? So we're not only taking the initial, we're seeing kind of like the size as it goes so we can project future length of contest, like get a range. The other reason is our reporting. We like to ask our subscribers how they did. So we want pool size to get good estimates on what we should expect to win. Like, oh, our chances were 1 in 1,000 of getting or whatever, or the pot is this and our pot odds are that divided by the number of entries. And so we use that to evaluate then when people tell us they did win, we want to report accurately and fairly how we're doing. And we want to know, like, are we doing better in certain types of pools? Do we need to adjust our logic in these types of pools? So we're taking all that info in to see how we perform over time.
Love it. Transparent, self assessment, trying to get better each and every year. I like hearing that when I'm subscribing to a site. Next thing here when you're customizing this is how many entries you have in your pool. Obviously, a lot of pools will let you have multiple entries. And then what is the entry fee of your pool as well? So let's just
Yeah.
type in an example one here. And then when does your pool start? Most of them start week one. This is an important one too. We talked about knowing your rules. If a game ends in a tie, do you survive or are you eliminated? Are ties treated as
Yeah.
losses? So that's another one to remember. And then where are you setting this pool up? So obviously
We
ESPN
list
has
some
a
common
pool.
sites. Yeah. We list
Yeah,
some common ones. And then you can always type in if it's not listed there.
for sure.
So yeah, on all that stuff, like when I'll promise you this, we're not good at predicting when a game will end in a tie, but it's still important to know because we log what picks you made to know if
Right.
that entry advanced or not. So we're tracking all that stuff after you tell us who you picked, what you do after you come back each week. Once the games are done, you say, "Oh, I picked this team." Um, and so we log that information. So all that stuff's important to know. The other thing I would say on the entry fee amount, that's obviously used to calculate the potential pot.
Yep.
So we can calculate value, but it's also used to assess entries compared to each other. So you could set up 5 different pools with different entry fee amounts. We're going to use that somewhat as a priority. Like, we're going to try to assess your overall portfolio and which entries are relatively most valuable. Like, because as we think about, do we give you the number one pick available to it or the number 2 or 3 as we diversify? We're going to try to like have some priority there on, oh, this is the entry most likely to win and has the highest relative expected amount right now. So we should prioritize this over this long shot entry that has used some future value and isn't quite as powerful.
For sure. And once you do all that setup, you'll get to hear, again, under the My Pool Picks tab, your My Survivor Pool Picks tool. I set up this example one, but let's use the real one I set up for Circa Survivor. And again,
Yeah.
keep an eye out for the new Circa Survivor pool tools that are coming out if you are in those massive pools where you have to register out in Las Vegas. Once you hit that button and once it's all set up, you're getting some quick write-ups here, some blurbs on potential options for week one, your best option, your second best, your third best, and a whole grid here that we saw. We have the general ones we showed you earlier in the video with data grid and season planner. Well, now this one is tailored to all the settings in your particular pool. So you have your pick grade for that week. Obviously, Pool Genius in this case is recommending that I take Arizona. It shows me everything I need to know: popularity, future value in this column, PG odds here for Pool Genius odds. So it's all in one spot. I can do the season view as well, tailored to my particular pool for that week, and some game notes as well. The Cardinals are playing on the road. I might want to stay away from that. This is a Thursday game. Obviously, it doesn't apply to week one because they're on full rest, but Thursday games in the future will be teams on very little rest. So divisional games as well, familiarity between them. I agree that typically you see a few more upsets when it's a divisional matchup with teams that know each other extremely well, especially if it's coaching staffs that have been going against each other for multiple years. So just full customization here for your particular pool is just fantastic stuff here, Jason. Anything you want to add on this view?
No, yeah, that's what you're going to see, something similar for each pool. Now, here's what I would say: if you're playing several entries with us, we give you portfolio advice. So we may not recommend the top option on every single entry because we also don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. Part of the beauty of playing a portfolio, a diversification approach, is you're picking 2 or 3 or maybe 4, depending on the size of your entry amounts, and you're spreading it out across those and maybe in a semi-concentrated fashion. So that's a question people would ask: why am I not being recommended my top option? Well, we are on some other entries, and we're recommending you diversify on this one. So you will see that. But yeah, you're going to see that. And I will say on Circa, since you brought it up, this is a Circa entry. We are. I think we're going to have like some more specific stuff on a data grid for Circa, where I'm actually projecting the Circa pick popularity, because these are the national numbers. So if you are a Circa player, you're gonna want to see that, because there will be more customization in the Circa product that will go into specific contest predictions.
If there's anybody who's also in the Circa pool, I know I'm not alone when I say I can't wait for that. So,
for example, I'll tell you right now, I think Denver's going to be more popular, and Arizona's going to be more popular in Circa than what we're showing. And I think Philadelphia will be down because of the holiday factor.
Interesting.
Just a directional guess on my part.
Yeah. Well, I wondered that myself, if Denver was going to be a little less popular in Circa, just with future value and whatnot. So it is a sharper pool, right?
Theoretically, yes, a certain percentage of it is, and definitely people have invested more money.
For sure. All right, let's wrap up here, Jason. Let's just bring up the two of us, and we'll kind of talk about anything else that comes to mind with this. I want to recap my 5 biggest tips when it comes to survivor pools. Number 1, avoid the chalk and the most popular pick in most cases. Number 2, be flexible week to week. Don't be afraid to move off of your prior opinions of teams. Number 3, understand future value and everything that means, not only with the best teams, but the worst teams as well, when you're trying to pick against those bad teams. Number 4, know your damn rules, people. It's amazing to me how many entries go dead instantly once week 1 is over, just because people forgot to make a pick or didn't understand their deadline. Know your pool rules. And number 5, lastly, just set a pick reminder for yourself. Set a weekly alarm in your phone that literally goes off the same time every week, just to remind you in case you forgot about that pick deadline, so you don't get eliminated as well. Jason, any other final thoughts here you want to add? Any other notes about Pool Genius, or just generally when it comes to survivor pool strategy?
Yeah, I've got some. And on your note, obviously super important. If you just show up, you're plus EV.
You are. You really are.
If you just show up, if you're just committed, I'm going to make a pick as long as my entry's alive. Even if you don't use advanced strategy, you're slightly plus EV just by that. And I would say this: if certain websites, not every contest, you can't do it in Circa, for example, but a lot of websites will let you preset picks. So if you're worried about it, you can also preset picks and then change them, like at the deadline. So kind of set a couple weeks in advance, just in case something happens and you get pulled away for a family event. You've got to pick in. So you can do that in a lot of websites. So I would advise that. That's also when we get pick popularity data. A lot of time what we're getting is what people have preset on Monday, and then they do switch it. So we'll see those switches. But I think that's a safe way to play. is to go ahead and put some in and then change them when you get to the actual week, and maybe preset some so that they're there just in case. Um, but my main advice would be play multiple entries. Like if I were, Survivor's a risky game. It is a long shot game. People love parlays. Survivor's like the ultimate parlay. It's like an 18-team parlay, 15-team parlay, however long you want to get into it. You're picking favorites every week, but your odds to get very far are slim because just how the math works out. Upsets happen. So if you played only one entry per year, you could go your whole life and never win, right? Even if you had a smart process. I would spread out. So if I had $1,000 to spend, I probably wouldn't take that full 1,000 and just go, if this is all I got to spend, I'm going to Circuit and putting an entry in. I would probably, in year one, save some of it for some late start pools, have about 2/3 of it or more in week one pools, maybe get a couple bigger money ones, and then you can find $5, $10 entry out there. And you can play those and build a bankroll by taking a diversified approach. My two biggest hits came in pools where I played several entries. Last year, it was one where I had 12 in. Just like everybody else got wiped out, I was down to one entry after 4 weeks out of the 12. That entry won because the entry that did get through had made smart picks future value-wise and was loaded up ready to roll through multi-pick weeks. But I was down to one out of the 12. I could have easily been out with all 12. A previous one I won, my most, I was down to one after 4 or 5 weeks, and I ran the table against everybody. So, chip in a chair, but your best chances to have a chip in a chair in the second half of a Survivor is to play multiple entries and try different paths and try different things. Make smart picks with all of them, but diversify.
Love it. And I'll just reiterate what I said earlier again. I would not be doing these videos if I didn't believe in the Pool Genius product, used it myself in the past, and profited from it. It's a fantastic product. I'm excited for what else they're going to roll out in the years to come with Pool Genius. And for any more information you have, you can go to the Pool Genius site. You can check out the links down in the description. You can follow Jason. Please make sure you're following him on X. Just a wealth of information at Jason Lisk. You can follow me on X at Steven Andress and the number one. Best of luck with your NFL Survivor pools.